Welcome to Teamfight Talkshow. I am DoA. With me is Frodan, and with us today is special guest as well from the Riot TFT design team is none other than Riot Statikk. That's right, the Statikk Shiv was named after him. Your guess is correct, but it's set 6. It's a brand new set. It's on the PBE. We played a couple days of it. A lot to talk about, but first, let's get to know our guests a little bit better. How's it going, Statikk?
It's going great. I mean, I'm always excited when we release new stuff, and we've been working in our basements on this for like months and months and months, and see everyone get so excited and be so positive about how they're feeling about this set. It's just been really exciting. So
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with this one. Frodan, we've been talking a lot about this set. We did a little bit of playtesting last week, a little bit of hanging out on the PBE this week. How have you been? We'll get into set 6 stuff, but how have you been just otherwise?
Life's super busy, man. I think that it's not an exaggeration to say that this might be the busiest month of my life. There's a crazy amount of stuff happening with Twitch rivals and work. I'm getting married in like 2 weeks. I'm moving the week after, and the week after that, there's another live event that I have to attend. Then there's like family holiday plans that I have to account for because my family might be moving with me, so I have to help scout for them.
Oh.
So it's just like there's just like a lot of insanity that, and also, oh yeah, set 6 is out. I have to learn the set. I have to cast a tournament.
So it's not that many augments. Don't worry about it.
I would totally drop all my life responsibilities and hardcore focus on TFT like everybody else if I could. But I'm gonna have to juggle. So I feel like I'm gonna start from behind. I'm trying to get as many games as I can in PB now because I think the first 2 weeks upon release I won't be able to play like whatsoever.
Dude, I am right there with you as far as life stuff. As those of you at home may notice, this is not my normal setup. I am actually in my father-in-law's office in Incheon, South Korea right now, hanging out with my wife here until early December, probably when we'll be back in the U.S. So yeah, I'm back in South Korea for a little while. I got some stuff to do here. And I just really wanted to play on the Korean server this set. That's what it's all about. I'm like, you know what, NA2 free. I'm gonna go to Korea. I mean, don't worry about Worlds results, by the way. But I wanted to play on the Korean server, so here I am, and my trusty, sadly, my trusty Rode NT-USB. We're not sponsored by them, but here's like a shout out to them anyway. It's been a great microphone for many years, but it died. It gave up the ghost on the trip over here, so. I'm gonna, build a little boat, have a Viking funeral for it, set it on fire and push it into a canal somewhere, I guess, or I'll shoot like a flaming arrow into it or something. But either way.
I'll download a candle app so I can light it up for you as you send it off.
Thank you. So I don't sound as good right now because I was going to use that microphone. That's my normal mic, but I'm on my webcam mic instead, so apologies there. But we've got a lot to talk about with set 6 right now. I mean, man, like, where do we even start? I mean, there's tons of new traits, tons of new champions. The big mechanic for the set is going to be the hextech augments, obviously. There's a lot to talk about there, but man, like, I'll throw this question over to you, Statikk. Like, when you look at everything in totality with set 6 here, with gizmos and gadgets, you worked a lot on the augments, but where do you think is a good place to start in terms of just talking about the set?
yeah, I guess just giving some context on this set. The set means a lot to us. I think both the TFT team as well as like the bigger Riot games as a whole. We're kind of doing a big moment with kind of Arcane that's coming out, the new show. So this was kind of like a big kind of tie-in with that, and we were playing this for a long time ago. So we wanted this to be kind of like our biggest set, our most ambitious set. And I think it shows. I hope it shows with all the things we tried to fit into this. I know for sure, like just as far as like memory budget and like size of the patches, this one's definitely gone a lot farther than we thought it would. But yeah, I think personally, I'd like to start with augments just because that's what I worked on a lot. This set, I'm really excited about it. I love that everybody's at least initially had a lot of positive feedback. So yeah, I mean that's definitely I think a great place to start.
All right, so let's talk about that. So there's 3 tiers of augments basically, and there are over 140 of them. Is that right? Do you have a specific number for us with that, or is it exactly 140 at the moment?
This is such a tagline thing. I mean, if you count the actual individual augments, I
bro.
think it's like 148 or 149.
Okay,
But
that's a good
it's
amount.
kind of cheating because it's kind of counting augments that have multiple tiers within them, because you'll see some of the augments will be like, hey, chemical overload 1, chemical overload 2, chemical overload 3. And like when we use the tagline, like there's 149 that we're counting those 3 times, and that's kind of cheap. I think if you talk about like unique, yeah, that's a lot. If you talk about unique augments, I think it's probably around 100.
Oh, okay. Only 100.
Yeah, so it was definitely a lot of work.
And so your job is to just lock yourself in your room, no windows, nothing convenient, right? Just to bunker down and just like hammer out. Like, how long did that take you? Just like crank all these out. I'm sure you came up with more than this, right? I'm sure the list was like much longer and you had to cut them down.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think we've had like a couple of brainstorm sessions where just like everyone was just typing into the spreadsheet, just like, oh my god, like what if you could like teleport a champion from another board and all these crazy ideas, you know, and there was just I still have, that's like a joke that we use a lot in champion brainstorms back in the day in League of Legends. You know, when we got to the point where people started giving ideas around like champions coming from different games, we were just like, all right, the brainstorm's over, we're done with this. So there's a lot of crazy ideas in this spreadsheet that we even used to track all the current ones. I think we probably, man, we had an initial brainstorm. I was struggling a lot actually at the beginning to just get everything in, because I was basically mainly working on it almost by myself at the beginning, because there's just so many moving parts, like you said, with the set. We got the champions, we got the traits, you know, there's all the stuff outside of the gameplay, you know, as far as like the art and the skins and the maps, and so like there's just so much going on. But yeah, I think after we got the first kind of bunch in, it was we really noticed like, oh my gosh, this game is so fun already, and the only thing we were missing was just more augments. So after that, we piled in a lot more people came in to come help build it further. With these set mechanics, we're never 100% sure if it's gonna pop off or not, because it's like it could be the worst thing or the best thing. I think in this case, we were really happy with what we saw when we put it first into the game. So yeah.
Well, it's been a lot of fun so far.
About the icons. Sorry to cut you off, though. Just
no, go ahead.
I know that there's like a lot of PBE. There's just, I guess, when you don't like if you don't have like an icon set for it, it's just like the generic TFT logo. Is there plans to like flesh out and individualize every single icon in hextech augments?
Yeah, it's already done actually. I think we really put them all in probably a day or two ago. Funny story, that actually originally we were planning to use the summoner icons. I don't know if you guys are familiar with League of Legends, the summoner icons, like as kind of like all the icons for all these augments. You can actually see in like, I think even our preview video that we have on YouTube, there's actually like some of the old icons being used from League of Legends. That was our original pitch, but the art team was like, well, some of these are kind of not that great as far as the fidelity goes, and this gets pretty confusing. So we ended up doing this kind of new style. Yes, now we did the kind of art, the style that they created for it. But yeah, all the augments have their own now, and you'll see maybe hopefully by the tournament start on PPE, they should all be in to have the unique augments, that icons that really express the kind of fantasy that each augment is trying to create.
So I've got kind of more of a technical question with all those augments then, because whenever you put a champion and their ability in TFT or something like that, it changes the board state. It changes the way things interact with each other. How difficult is it to program like that many different things that change the game so much? Because you've got things to the extent that like the board is essentially a Sunfire cape, you know. So there's a lot of kind of crazy stuff happening and things interacting in ways that we haven't seen before. How difficult was that to actually get it in there and get it, working?
Yeah, I think it's been like a double-edged sword, because we're reusing a lot of stuff that has been in previous sets. I think that's something that everyone will notice. It's like this is kind of like a greatest hits of TFT vibe as far as the augments go. We kind of cherry picked a lot of our favorite things that we've loved and we've known players loved in the past, as well as come up with some new stuff as well. So I was able to reuse some certain things that were old, but then oftentimes I'd have to like fix it to actually work with all the new stuff. As we make TFT, better and add more things in, we usually have to like refurbish old stuff. And that definitely happened a lot. Yeah, honestly, I needed a lot of help. We have an amazing tech designer. Their name's Chloe, and they do a lot for making sure that all this works together. Yeah, it's just a lot of work for sure. I spent a lot of like random nights just like, oh god, can I just figure out how to get this to work? There's like a lot of weird ones that I hope you guys will see some of these because there's so many and certain augments require certain scenarios for you to be in to even be offered to you. You may never see the certain augments if you just don't play enough, you know. So it's gonna be interesting.
Now, that was something I was going to ask real quick too, is how much is what you're already kind of doing in the game influencing the augments that you're shown?
A lot. So
Okay.
on the first augment choice, there's actually quite a lot of randomization in order to basically open up some different pathways for you. But the second and third ones are highly what we call curated. I don't know if this is the right word, but we use the word curated, which means like it looks at your board and then determines what things are actually like reasonable for you. And that size is still pretty large when you have 100 augments. There's still a lot to choose from, even when you're doing that kind of curation, or as we call it. But yeah, for the most part, you are getting ones that are quite tailored to your position, and it may never be perfect because we can't come up with like, you know, every single scenario where it's like, oh yeah, this is exactly when you would want, you know, the cyber augment. But we try our best to try to offer you at reasonable time so that you feel like you have a meaningful decision to make between the three augments. So
Makes sense.
Yeah, I'm kind of. It's actually fascinating that some people can like play the entire set and not see some of these augments in general. I do remember hearing a rumor that there was stuff being worked on for set 6 that was perceived so well internally that they were debating whether or not that they should carry over some stuff for future sets. And obviously you probably can't confirm or deny any of that, but I will say that augments seem to be very well received. I draw a lot of inspiration from Hearthstone Battlegrounds when they did something called Dark Moon Fair Prizes. They basically had this like either temporary or permanent enchantment based on when you were introduced for different junctures of the game. This feels like it was iterated upon and then cranked up to 11 in true TFT wacky fashion. You know, when someone brought that up, was that ever actually on the table, or is that just a very interesting coincidence?
are you speaking about like the fact that like, yeah, I mean these kind of systems I guess like have been pretty popular I guess in game design for the past like 5 or 6 years. I feel like the idea of just like these kind of three choices, and like, you know, obviously I know Dan, you did a lot of Hearthstone, and Discover is kind of like their thing. Definitely
Games like Halo
inspired by that.
too, you're getting things, you know, it's a roguelike
Yeah, yeah,
mechanic,
that
yeah.
roguelike.
Yeah.
Everyone's calling it like that roguelike mechanics or roguelite mechanics. Yeah, I think we were definitely very inspired by all those types of games for sure when we made it, and I hope it's delivering on that and more in a way with the kind of content we've made for it. Because I think sometimes in a lot of other games, like they'll give you the three choices, but they don't really seem that interesting, or they don't actually change the
Yeah.
way you're kind of thinking about the things. And
Yeah.
I really wanted with augments to challenge everybody to like really try to think about how to make this work for them. And not all the augments are gonna like tweeze your brain, but a good chunk of them hopefully make you feel like every game of TFT is more interesting to play. As far as like, yeah, like moving forward from here, we're honestly just right there with you. As far as like, we don't really know. Like there's a lot of positive reception both internally and now hopefully externally that we're seeing, but we've got to see it roll out to, you know, all the other regions, see the feedback. I 100%, even if we do keep, you know, some version of augments moving forward, it would definitely have to be iterated pretty heavily, I think, because this is just the first version, and I think there's a lot more to do both within this set and maybe beyond. So
Yeah, it blows my mind because I say if it's like 100 plus, I mean 140 augments, like what's 5.5 gonna do? It's like, are you gonna like double it, 280 augments? The possibilities are really
1,000
much warping my
augments.
mind. But I guess, you know, I did have like a follow-up question, I guess, in terms of internal sentiments since we're speaking about it. It's been really difficult just balancing the traits and champions and items in that sense based off like stages and timings and drops. Now you're entering another like dimension and a half of balance. What's the current, there's like a little meter that gauges the threat level. Like what's the threat level of balance currently dialed in at internally at Riot for things like the hextech augments for set 6?
Oh yeah, I think like realistically speaking, the live team should be like slamming the red button, just like alarm, alarm, alarm. It's red alert for sure. Because I've had a lot of experience on being on the live team, both on League of Legends and on TFT, and the one thing I always told both Mort and Ken, who are like kind of the main people working on the live team for TFT, is like I promise you this will be fun. I just don't know how it's gonna go as far as kind of like the game health and the balance and the fairness and integrity that we also want TFT to live up to. That's kind of like the hard line we have to walk as far as like, hey, TFT's wacky and fun and interesting, but it's also skillful and fair and competitive. And I think this is going to be by far, like you said, the hardest set to balance because each of those augments needs to be tuned. Some of these augments just may be unreasonable for where we put them at. Maybe you shouldn't be offered certain augments at stage 2 or whatever in stage 1 versus stage, and then like we've thought about all these things, but without a ton of like playtesting and data, it's really hard to figure out what rules we actually need. And so we kind of just need to give it to you guys and let us know when something seems like way too off. I do think the first month or so and this upcoming tournament, it's going to be pretty wacky, I think. So hold on to your horses, I think.
I always feel like, you've got this fun, wacky sort of aspect to TFT and the way it's designed and all that. And everyone we talk to from the development team is generally a pretty fun, positive person. But then you look at the balance in the game, and it kind of reminds me of like those monks in the Middle Ages that like their path to spiritual enlightenment was to whip themselves over and over again. And like I feel like that's what you guys are doing each set. You're like, no, shadow items weren't enough. We need to like make it harder on ourselves. Like this needs to keep us up at night even more than that. And like the whipping just starts happening more intensely. But we appreciate it because it's fun for us. So thank you. We appreciate that.
I think the one like maybe positive aspect to this is that like because augments aren't controllable by the player per se, like you can influence it, and obviously you're making a decision. You can't really force as much as you used to be able to in other sets. So that might be a possible, kind of balancing lever in and of itself. But I do think ultimately, it's going to be quite a ride from here on out.
Yeah, the game feels like a more like a journey, I would say, than previous sets have felt. Where things kind of evolve and change over time, like they normally do in TFT. But making these choices, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It kind of feels like there's more of a story happening in the game with your board than in previous sets, if that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't.
I think it's a good summary of it, and I think we should probably just start talking a little bit more about set 6, like I guess formally here, since I think we want to like go through all the traits, just kind of explain what's going on. I know some people
should get to that.
Still haven't had a chance to like look at PB. Maybe they've been too busy to even watch streams. So we'll start here with the origins and just kind of walk things through. I guess maybe we can just like take one each here and just like maybe discuss like very briefly what we think. I guess I'll go first with Academy. So Academy is a scaling vertical that you can basically like stack a bunch of power similar to say Spellweavers from the previous set. They have bonus attack damage and ability power though, so it's not just like ability power unlike the Spellweavers. And so they like learn from their allies. That's kind of like a little meme that's being passed around internally with a bunch of practice groups. And they basically just gain stats whenever any ally casts an ability, and it stacks the more academics that you have. And they got some really powerful carries. I think the most notable ones are Lux and Yone for sure, because Lux does this giant burst as an Arcanist. And then Yone has this really cool, unique ability that doesn't exist in Summoner's Rift. It's actually something that's been introduced new to TFT, where he summons a clone of himself that doesn't really die unless he dies, and then it doubles up your DPS or doubles up whatever you have. So it's really powerful. And of course, shout out to Yumi, the trait being cuddly. You can see that kind of at the bottom as well, which is that Yumi, like a very good loyal cat, attaches herself to an ally and then gives it a shield, and of course becomes untargetable, just like in Summoner's Rift. So equally annoying and very powerful.
Yeah, it's next on the list, I suppose, is going to be Chemtech. Do you want to just go through all of these, or should we just skim it?
Oh, I mean, it's actually up to you guys. Like, it's just something that, I mean, we can talk about it, or because I feel like if we if we just kind of skip past it, I feel like we don't talk a lot about the set itself, and we just kind of start going over like topics. But I kind of want to set the framework of like, these are certain things that we're thinking about. These are certain units that you can start itemizing and trying to think about as carries versus like not or support units and whatnot.
All right. Well, let's talk about Chemtech, though. So Chemtech, I would say if you're looking for a trait that's probably, in my experience so far, the easiest trait to put together and play Chemtech, get Mundo as your tank, get Urgot as your carry, give him 80 items. Works pretty well. Chemtech, when they drop below 75% health, you can see they get a lot of stuff. You get damage reduction, you also get attack speed, and you get regeneration. And so that's something that benefits literally every type of character in the game. It benefits tanks, obviously, to keep your front line going. It benefits carries to help give them sustain. And there's a lot of different things you can use with this. You can kind of tie it in with assassins a little bit if you want to play Twitch. Again, like I mentioned, I think the most straightforward way to play it is to have a strong front line with Dr. Mundo as a centerpiece, and then have Urgot be your main AD carry and throw in another twin shot to increase the DPS a little bit there. But I think it's one of the easiest traits to just go vertical on right now and have a pretty solid game. So if you're looking for some place to start with set 6, I think Chemtech is a good place to go.
A lot of people have been calling for Dr. Mundo's head right now because you put up Warmogs and any kind of resistance on this guy. Oh man,
he's strong.
He's unkillable right now. So Statikk, can you talk a little bit about Victor's design a little bit? He seems kind of awkwardly fitted as a 5 cost, and there's a lot of criticisms about whether or not Victor's even worthy of being a 5 cost. People are saying like they'd maybe pick him up as a 3 cost. Like, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think with 5 costs it's really difficult because they kind of serve two purposes. One is like, hey, I'm often a kind of end cap build to your build, right? Like, oh, this is the ultimate Chemtech or the ultimate Arcanist. But also at the same time, we need them to be pretty generally flexible, such that if you find one in the shop pretty early, like it should like bait you to try to play them, because they're rare and they should be really efficient. So it's kind of walked that fine line of like, hey, I am part of my traits, but also I need to be flexible enough to be useful. And I think at times internally he was like one-shotting boards every time he cast. He was kind of his original design was just like, hey, here's the lasers, they come in, they blow everyone up. And I think slowly we've tried to add in a couple of different mechanics to help him be a bit more utility, like give him a little more utility as far as the armor shred, I think, on his kit, and as well as the like shield break. And he's hard because he is also competing with Lux, who's a prominent Arcanist carry right now. But I'm confident we'll be able to figure out a better place for him. He might also just be underpowered right now. I feel like when I play him, his lasers just might be missing when they shouldn't, and something's going wrong. Or so I've seen some fights where he does pop off, but it's not consistent. So
yeah, that's generally my sentiment. I'm sure that will tweak, and it could be right. Like once we just start noticing his lasers actually hit, and then like, oh, that's actually doing a lot of work. So we could probably see his role there. So Statikk, would you like to do Clockwork at all here? Talk a little about that.
Yeah. Clockwork. I mean, as a design, it really was just kind of like the attack speed buff trait. I mean, we've had this many times throughout our different iterations of TFT sets. So the champs are Camille, Zillion, Jhin, and Orianna. This one's interesting because you can't really activate Clockwork, until you get to that, like Clockwork 4 until you get later into the game. You get that double 4 costs, and that's pretty hard to get to sometimes. Right now, I know it's quite a strong combo to run just Jhin and Orianna with a bunch of other good units. It seems like a pretty flexible composition as far as building it. But yeah, I think it's nice because you have an AD carry and you have like an AP carry in Orianna. And it's easy to kind of find items for each of them, and then you have a very flexible, front line that you can put in front of them to hold it down. I think enchanters and bodyguards have been pretty popular to put with them, yes. But I've seen all sorts of different things. I think I'm sure Clockwork Colossus will also work. So there's just a lot of interesting things. The actual mechanic is really just attack speed, and we added a little bit of flavor by saying, hey, based on the augments, you'll get a little bit more attack speed. So as the game goes on and you hit those augment breakpoints, you'll just get a little bit more attack speed. Yeah.
Makes sense. And we all know how that really helps Jhin as a sniper, which we'll probably briefly talk about till the second half. I'm sure the classes we won't spend as much time as Origins. Orianna, I've seen a lot of people try to itemize her as a carry. I wouldn't recommend it currently unless they significantly change some of her ratios. But her utility is fantastic. Very reminiscent of Diana, just like the Moonfall, the way it disrupts. And I have even seen people frontline her to try to get her cast a little bit quicker. So I've experimented with it. I'm not entirely sold, but I think Orianna is one of the more interesting units, interesting forecast for sure. That's a lot more than meets the eye. Let's talk about Enforcer. Now, this one's actually quite interesting because Enforcer is what many people equivocate to as being a Zephyr built into a trait. And some people were like, oh, well, is that really worth putting it into a trait? And it turns out that Enforcer might actually be one of the most powerful late game traits possible because, yes, it is a Zephyr. So if people stack the Mundo, they stack the Cho'Gath 3 with Infinite Feast, they have this giant Galio, they have like an unkillable 3-star unit that's in the back line that, like a Jace, for example, that's like 2-star, stuff like that. You can use Enforcer to actually lock it down. And that, as you know, Zephyrs can swing fights. So situationally, this ends up being an incredibly powerful trait. And I kind of want to actually throw it back to Statikk here. Is like, the intention of this was, it feels a lot more like something that you weave in and out based on what your composition is. And I'm curious if there was anything more to it than that.
I mean, a lot of times when we're working on some of these traits, we're coming from a very thematic angle. Enforcer just made sense for these champions, who are about like bringing justice and law to Piltover, or wherever they're from. I guess Fiora's Demacia. But yeah, originally, actually, the mechanic was a true Zephyr, as in they were taken out of combat completely. I think that we ran into some kind of gameplay issues where it was just very frustrating to play against, where it was like, oh gosh, they can guarantee take out my biggest tank and my biggest carry for the fight, for like a significant portion of the fight at least. And so we added that rule near the end where, they're actually not gone, but they will break out if they take enough damage. As far as like actual gameplay goes, it's nice because these kind of like 4 bunched units inside of a origin, they generally are pretty flexible. Like you don't have to, activate some like specific thing to get them to actually be decent DPS. Like I know Fiora and Jace do a lot of damage, even if you have like no traits active for them really. So you kind of just get as a bonus as far as like the Enforcer bonuses. I don't think you need to play around it too much as the Enforcer, but then as the opponent, you actually like really think about it a lot. And you're like, oh gosh, if my Mundo's gonna get locked on for the first 4 seconds, what am I gonna do to not lose?
Right.
So
yeah,
I think force right back. That was equal playing field.
Fight enforcement with enforcement. There you go. Yeah. Well, let's talk about Glutton a little bit. So this is a Tahm Kench only trait here, and this is one of my favorite things actually in set 6 right now. It's really fun. You can feed an ally to Tahm Kench. You just kind of hold it over him a little bit until he opens his mouth, and then you can eat it, or then he can eat it, and get some stats out of that, get some HP. So you can build up your Tahm Kench that's on the board. I was watching Frodan play a game earlier. He had a Tahm Kench on the board, a Tahm Kench on the bench, and he was feeding each of them each turn so that when he was able to 2-star later on, he could just have that much more HP. So you're able to do that too. But I mean, he's just a fun unit in general. He eats people, he spits out gold components, all this kind of stuff. We'll get to that a little bit later, but Glutton is a fun one. I was just going to do that quick and then go on to Imperial, unless you want to talk a bit more about Glutton.
Go for it. It's a fun one. It's pretty epic. Also, situationally, even better than Zephyr, because if you're able to use position... Yeah. Oh, sorry, just like Tahm Kench as a unit. If you position him and he devours something, it's just even worse than Zephyr at times. But anyways.
He just holds him, yeah. Because he'll keep doing it throughout the round. But let's move on to Imperial a little bit. So Imperial, this was in a different version. This was a set 1 trait, if I remember right, from way back when. It didn't do the same thing, though. This is kind of like the next evolution of this, where at the start of combat, whichever Imperial did the most damage last round becomes a Tyrant who does bonus damage. And then when the Tyrant dies, the Imperial who has dealt the most damage this combat becomes a new Tyrant. So can the Tyrant die and still have done the most damage and then be the Tyrant again next round? Because I haven't played around with this trait that much yet. Okay, just wanted to make sure. But yeah, so it's a way to use this trait to continue to boost one of your carries. Samira is kind of one that people have been playing around with a little bit. I haven't seen it be super successful yet. Scion seems like an interesting option, but I'm going to throw this over to you guys because I haven't done a lot with Imperial yet in my games. I haven't played around this trait that much yet. Do you have any more experience?
So I think Imperial is supposed to capture the power fantasy of a hyper carry. The idea that you just have one unstoppable champion that just completely destroys everything. The Imperial builds that seem to be the most successful is when you 3-star Samira. And the most important item on her would be Runan's Hurricane, because it just gets her damage really going, and she also shreds the armor whoever she attacks. She's using the same skin of her release, so from Festival of Beats at 4.5. I was expecting just like instinctually that Samira would be jumping around. She does not.
Yeah.
So I was positioning her in like very bold places, and she was getting punished pretty hard. So just keep that in mind. But Samira 3 with Imperial, and let's say you're even fortunate enough to get even 2 Imperials. Like there's an augment, for example, that makes 2 tyrants. You can actually set up Scion or Talon as a secondary carry as well. And Swain's a really good tank. You know, don't be like, you know, don't be like distracted by the fact he's like a 2-cost Arcanist. Like you can have Swain be 3-star, and then you don't have to play like Talon or even Scion, and you can be very flexible with it. And then after that, you just kind of go deeper into the Challenger trait. So Imperial is really fun. It's probably the trait I've actually played the most alongside Chemtech, and I've tried making all of them carries. I want to give a shout out to Talon. I think Talon is actually quite possibly the most underrated 2-cost right now. Him getting the 2-star and holding 3 items is very powerful, and might even be one of the best 2-costs to consider re-rolling in the future, but we're not entirely sure yet, because a couple of 2-costs we'll talk about in a second here are about to show him up.
Yeah, Imperial has some of the like fun augments. Like you said, one of them is dual rule, where there's 2 tyrants. So, and the other one is actually called One for All. So basically, as allies die, they'll actually sacrifice their HP and give it to the tyrant. So they can get pretty big.
Nice,
pretty cool
nice.
combinations there for sure.
I love it. I love it. A reference to Dark Star, a little reference to anime. It's great. Okay, that's awesome. Mercenary. Now, this is all you, man. Mercenaries, the fortune comeback. Like, let's talk a little bit about mercenaries here, and also talk about like what does it mean that the dice are luckier, or like upon, you know, can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can dive into that. I mean, I think like from a thematic point of view, we knew fortune was such a big hit in set 4, and we wanted to bring some version of it back. And we needed to do it in a way that was new and interesting. So obviously with the champions we chose is a very pirate thematic going on. And so we had this idea around, you know, dice and filling the chest full of loot and paying that out. So yeah, as you get into higher tiers of mercenary, basically the things that can get put into the chest when you lose or win are basically increased. So if you get to like Mercenary 7, like it gets pretty crazy as far as like, you know, it could be a force of nature in there. It could be, you know, Nikos. It could be all sorts of very powerful things. But when you're at the lower tiers, that like
crown now, right?
Yeah,
Tactician's crown.
Yeah, we recently changed it. Tactician's crown. That's correct. Yeah. And you know, if you're down at like kind of like Mercenary 3, it's gonna be more just like some gold, and maybe you'll get a component if you're lucky. But for the most part, it's pretty tame. So you know, when you're playing Mercenary, it's still that same strategy that people are used to. I think as far as fortune goes, it's like, hey, I'm kind of like playing a fairly weak board because my units just aren't that strong. Mercenaries is not going to help you with combat power, so you're kind of trying to lose but barely lose, and then hit some kind of big power break point, and then turn the game around and kind of snowball from there. So it's still the same thing, and I think they have a lot of different ways to carry. Gangplank is kind of like your AD carry. You're going to put in, you know, crit items on him, 80 items as much as you can, and he can farm gold for you directly with his. I think his spell does that by default. So
if you kill someone, yeah.
Yeah, and then Misfortune is actually a surprisingly powerful AP carry if you get her going. She does a lot of damage if you can 3-star her, and you have the end cap with Tom Kench. So there's a lot of ways for Mercenary to like super skill into the game, because they have both the loot coming from the die as well as Tom Kench. Actually, when he kills units, he can actually with his spell he can actually spit out components, and you can kind of keep building, have a full team with full items. You know, you have like 10 units on board. It's just kind of crazy. So definitely Mercenary is kind of like a 8th or 1st kind of composition still. So we're hoping that it creates a lot of fun moments.
And fun when I've played around with it so far. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of that. Frodan, do you want to take Mutant? This is a fun one. I'm sure we're gonna be talking about Mutant for a while.
So yeah. Mutant is like the hextech augment within the hextech augment. You know, it's like, what do you really get every single game? Basically, Mutant rolls like a different trait that's very reminiscent of past traits. So, you know, one that, you know, is like really easy to understand, for example, is mutants can basically become cybernetics, where anyone holding an item component of any kind gets health and attack damage. And so that's like early snowball potential for mutant. There's also ones that reminiscent of predators, right? Which is very fitting that, you know, Kog'Maw, 2-cost that we're talking about 2-costs that are really powerful, that can reroll or just have a really good item holder position. mutants, there's a trait that executes when you deal damage based on the percentage health. So if they're like, I believe 20% health or less, and you hit them with anything, they instantly die. So Kog'Maw just comes back as like a predator, right? Statikk basically said that Set 6 feels like almost feels a little bit like, Smash Bros. Ultimate. Like, yes, everybody is back, and that's kind of a little bit of what Mutant does. It rolls back a couple of different sets in different periods of time and gives you a little time capsule of it, while also giving you some really interesting, fun things to fit, right? So we talked about Kog'Maw. People have been, re-rolling Cho'Gath. I think that's Mismatch Sock's favorite build on the alpha testing, where he was, itemizing Cho as the carry, giving him like Titan's resolves and Warmog, which is like very hard to kill. I've seen people utilize Malzahar carry. That's something that Goobums is experimenting a lot with. I experiment as well, top 4. Mundo is just Mundo. He's unkillable. They're probably gonna have to nerf him at one point. And then Kai'Sa, I think, is probably the definitive 5-cost AP carry, because she just has so much powerful scaling as the fight goes on that as the fight lasts longer and longer, she's just gonna isolate more and deal more damage. So every single one of these mutants in their own right, including even Cassid in certain situations, are really, really powerful, and they're different each game. So you can't just say like, I'm a mutant one trick, because that doesn't tell us anything. That tells us that you just like those champions in general, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it is. So I want to ask you, Statikk, when you were designing, or when the team was designing Mutant anyway, because a lot of the traits are traits that are brought back. Like, we've got a Darkstar-esque trait in there too. There's like a Blade Master-esque trait that's in there. How did you go about deciding which traits from the past you would sort of get inspiration from to put into Mutant?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was actually just like ones that were memorable, but also ones that synergize specifically with certain champions. Like, we knew Blade Master would work very well with Kog'Maw because he has an on attack proc effect basically, and like kind of the Astro is really strong with Malzahar because his mana gets so low and he's just basically like chain casting this dot, kind of like similar to Brand from last set, I think. So I think that's kind of like our guiding lights there, but also we were just kind of going crazy with it. I think it was something very thematic. Like Mutant, it's kind of changing. It's something that's unstable and it's kind of something you can't predict. So I think when you're playing Mutant, you definitely gotta really make sure you know what you're going into as far as that game in particular. So we thought it was kind of cute that maybe like at the start of every game, if it was nice players, they'd be like, "Oh, guys, Mutant is this game in case," or maybe somebody's gonna like misinformation. They'll be like, "Oh, Mutant's totally Astro," but it's actually like Blade Master or whatever.
Mortdog said that y'all tried Keeper as well.
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, it just didn't really work out. It doesn't make too much sense because you didn't really want to bunch these units together, and it didn't make too much sense. So we tried tons of weird stuff and the stuff that's.
I like how it's turned out. Yeah, we talk about 6.5 changes. Hey, new mutations. There you go. There's one option. But let's move on. Talk about Scrap. Oh, by the way, I did do the mana reduction Malzahar build, and it is really fun. If you like the Cassiopeia, the Brand, just constantly casting and like just doing a lot of damage over time to a bunch of different people on the other side, that's the way you want to go. So keep an eye out for that if you like those builds in previous sets. Let's talk about Scrap. This is another interesting one. At the start of combat, components held by Scrap champions turn into full items for the rest of combat, and you also get a shield for each component equipped in your army, including those that are part of a full item. So you can do things to sort of like cheat 2 items on someone. If you have one completed item and one component, that component's going to turn into something. Am I right in that it always turns into an item that uses that component? Because I've done Scrap a little bit, but not a ton yet. Okay, it is. So it's kind of a cool way to sort of get a lot of itemization across your team with lesser commitment, I guess. But it's fun.
Scrap is one of my favorite, just from like a gameplay standpoint. It's just so fun. Like, you're just getting all these random items. You don't know what's happening. It's just kind of your characters feel scrappy in that sense. They feel really resourceful. That they're just kind of like making it work with whatever. It's like, oh, my Ziggs has a shroud this fight. I don't know what's going on. It's pretty fun. It's usually paired with Innovator early. It's super strong in the early game just because you're just using your kind of item advantage over your opponents. But I think the hard part about playing Scrap is figuring out how you're going to scale into the late game, because it's really hard to try to rely on these random items in the late game fights. You're not going to be able to know exactly how you're going to carry the fight out. So Jinx is pretty important, I think, to this build if you want to actually play it into the late game. But I think there's also a lot of plays where you play this early game and then you pivot out based on how your game's going. So it's something to look out for.
It
Yeah, I think if
feels
you
like
can.
the
Okay.
best trait to just splash in a lot of times because it helps you just generate a little bit more tempo where you need it the most. And you can really get some good skill expression based off of like what you think might happen, right? So like a really common thing is to position a belt onto a scrap unit, say like Ezreal or Blitzcrank, who you sometimes keep, a lot of times you keep in the back. Sometimes Blitzcrank go in the front. And then that belt can turn into a Zeke's Herald, it can turn into a Banshee's Claw, and you position around that possibility. Sometimes, of course, it doesn't work out and it turns out to be Morel Namicon on a unit that can't use it. But it's okay because that's what you're accounting for. And on the other end, like if you know it's a frontliner, you play more like a vest. If like it's Ziggs, he can hold like a tier or like a rod and pretty much any item he can use there. So I think the scrap is like really, really great design. And it's also something that doesn't feel like really oppressive, but it also feels like if someone puts together even a 4 scrap board, you know, like a scrap 4, still feels like if they did a good job putting some tempo together, I'm like, oh, that's actually really cool. I'm not even like upset I lost my streak or anything because it feels like they really are playing like some 4-dimensional chess, like because they're separating everything. Like you said, there's like a tier here, a belt there, a vest there, and a sword. It's like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just playing scrap units and keeping it together.
If you're the type of person that likes to greed their item components early, like this is
Yes.
the trait for you, right? Because you don't need to commit. If you, and as you can see, there's 2 1-cost scrap and 2 2-cost scrap, so it's very feasible to hit 4 early. You get 3 components turning into 3 completed items, and like we were saying, that's a good way to gain tempo and just gain a strong early game board without committing to those components, which then you swap the scrap champions out, you make the items you're looking for, and you're just that much farther ahead because you get more agency over which items you make. So yeah, it's just a great early to mid game trait. It's been a lot of fun to use. Yeah.
I do want to give a shout out to Janna. I think that a lot of people are like, oh, isn't this just Janna from set 2 from Rise of the Elements? Like, well, she's a lot better. She's healing and the entire team. And I think her tags are so good. The Enchanter, Scholar, Scrap dynamic is really, really powerful. So if you're passing Janna in a lot of your roll downs right now, you're making a giant mistake. I think she's incredible right now, utility. And almost every composition would probably want to play something like her. So don't sleep on Janna.
We'll get to more of that when we look at some of the other traits that she has a little bit later, because they're very easy to splash in and use well. Frodan, do you want to take Sister and Socialite?
Yeah, I'll do these 2 real quick. So Sister's like a pairing very similar to Soulbound from Lucia and Senna, where it's like there's only 2 of them, and they specifically buff each other because they're sisters. First of all, S tier naming, it's very fun. We know exactly what it is. It's great for flavor, and also like very poignant for TFT memes as well. It's just like it's great across the board, 10 out of 10 flavor wise for me, and also surprisingly very impactful because there's a little package that exists in the late game with Vi, Jinx, and Jace that I think are very, very powerful to tech into late game. If you ever find yourself with items that they're split down the middle, they're a little bit of AP, a little bit of AD, some attack speed as well. Jinx can hold it all. She's actually probably the most flexible carry in the game currently from what I see because she scales off of pretty much every stat that you would want offensively at the moment. And so you can justify a ton of combinations onto her. And then Jace, same thing, right? He can be a frontliner or a backliner, and then Vi's just great utility. So I really like this trio in general. So shout out to the sisters plus the stepbrother, Jace. That's my little download.
Right. Splash and Force for late game. Always good.
And then Socialite is kind of a throwback to, speaking of set 2, probably the most forgotten set of all of them in terms of people's like favorite sets of all time, unless you ask like Delicious Milk. Socialite is an elemental hex kind of reborn in the form of like everybody gets the same hex, but there's like specific bonus power that gets associated with being in that spot, and everybody knows where it is, which is really fun for positioning nuance. The first Socialite buff is probably the most impactful one, which is just a flat bonus damage period. And we all know that you want a mixture of additive, like stuff like AP and AD on top of like crit chance and on top of things like this bonus damage is really powerful. So really good to augment, but again, keep in mind like how your items are stacking. So sometimes you might be overvaluing the Socialite buff and not enough about other things, but it's really good. The most important thing about Socialite, in my opinion, is that all these units, even if their function is not the best individually, like Tarek's okay, Seraphine's okay, Gal's really good, but their tags are also super nice to splash in as well. So I think Socialite's really cool. And also like it's one of these really funny things where it tugs on your greed, right? You're like, I can always squeeze in a second Socialite. I want more mana. I'll just go for the third one and just carry it. And it's just one of these like it perfectly tugs on that or tickles that part of the brain where you have these risk and reward trade-offs that you always want to just stack more damage and more power onto one unit because I think that's the most addicting thing about like building out carries in TFT. You always feel like it's not enough power yet.
Yeah, I think
Totally.
with Socialite, it's like one of the key things to note is like depending on where it is, that kind of like decides who you can actually put on the hex. Sometimes it'll be on your front line, which means you can't put it on your range carry. So really noting where it is on the map before you commit to who's going to be in it. And on top of that, there's always the Zephyr mind games. Once everyone knows where that slot is, it's just like that's kind of a dangerous spot to put your carry half the time. So it's a bit of a mind game there. So
Very true.
It'll be fun to watch in tournaments specifically to call people out who are maybe focusing it, tunneling on it too hard, and then other people that use it very creatively. And I'm really looking forward to casting that trait in particular.
Yes, yes, that's great.
Yes. Statikk, do you want to talk about Syndicate?
Yeah, so Syndicate basically will kind of like this is kind of like I guess like the noble-ish kind of buff from the past, but kind of a darker spin on it with the Syndicate thematic. But basically, one of your units is basically going to be much tankier, gaining Omni Vamp, Armor, and Magic Resist based on how low they are. And then as you up the tiers of this trait, it actually starts spreading out to all the Syndicates and then eventually your whole team. So it's really important with this trait to either commit to going deep or kind of just get out of it pretty fast. In the early game, you can play that 3 Syndicate and usually like have Darius just be really tanky forever and just healing over and over. But then if you keep that into the mid game, you're going to be hurting. So committing to whether you can get to, I think you can only get to 7 if you actually get the augment or an emblem. So mapping that out is really important if you're going to try to go deep Syndicate. But the main carries in this composition are like Shaco and Akali, who are actually both assassins, which is funny. I know Shaco is actually just bugged on PvE. He's just been absurdly powerful. But yeah, he's the exact same one from like set 3. He kind of does that stealth, big crit. So putting lifesteal items on him is just really powerful. I guess he doesn't even really need it because he gets the Omnivamp from Syndicate, so you can kind of go damage, maybe a GA, stuff like that. But yeah, every unit in this comp can actually kind of carry. Maybe besides Braum, I mean, he's meant to be like a big, frontline utility, kind of like the Sejuani of this set. But everyone else actually does a lot of damage when you put items on them. So I think there's a lot of ways to play this comp right now, and they have some fun augments as well. So.
Yeah,
totally. And then Shaco, as we know, destroys Akali, can execute. I do think Shaco outshines her, just probably because you have more time with Shaco throughout the game, so it feels like he's more impactful. Shout out to Zyra. I think that her utility is like kind of secretly OP. I think it's like a little bit too potentially powerful for just the 2 cost, but I mean we'll let time tell the tale here. But I think that she's like an early candidate for people who are going to be like, oh my god, Zyra's too good because. It's an entire row like that you can do. So like if you do the whole like the sentinel positioning where you have like one like Galio in the front line and Lucian and Senna and all the sentinels in the back line, Zyra destroys that because she just like completely like stuns everyone in the back line. So you gotta be really careful with how you position if you know Zyra's in your pool.
I would say
versus snipers for sure.
Yes, snipers. Yes, very very good.
Don't sleep on Twisted Fate either, because I've seen some people 3-star Twisted Fate with some AP items, and he does a lot of damage. So I think everybody in that list can do pretty well. It's like Statikk was saying. I think there's a lot of carry potential and a lot of champions on that. But let's move on to Yordle. I've carefully engineered it, so I get to be the one to talk about Yordle first. See, yes. I had it all planned in advance. Yeah, one of my favorite traits ever. This is a trait that it's different. It's very different now than it was back in set 1. Yordles just got dodged to the extent that you got like 60% dodge for your Yordles at one point, so it's just annoying to play against. But they were really fun. You had Gnar back then and stuff like that. But this Yordle is a little bit interesting. If you like re-rolling, you're going to like Yordles because, as you can see, you just get random Yordle added to your bench for free at the beginning of each combat if you have 3, and then you go up to 6, and then the Yordle's abilities cause 20% less to cast. And I know there's like some hidden stuff as well that can happen if you get up to 6 Yordles. I actually haven't seen this in game yet. I haven't been able to pull this off. So maybe one of you want to talk about it a little bit more, because I've heard about this, but I have not yet seen it myself. So
yes, okay. So the important thing to note is that Yordles, unlike Draconics, can't give you a Yordle at the beginning of a round that's already a 3-star. So in set 5, if you played Draconic and you got Udyr 3 already, you could still hatch Udyrs out of your egg, which was pretty disappointing, but I mean, that's just part of the way the mechanic was balanced.
Yeah.
Yordle doesn't do that. So if you have a 3-star Poppy, you will no longer get any Poppies onto your bench. Same with Ziggs, Lulu, Tristana, Heimer, and Vex. So that brings you to the question, what happens if you 3-star every single Yordle? What would the game do? It can't give you something that, it can't give you a 10th Yordle of something you already have. It instead pops out a Veigar. That's right. This is an Easter egg of a hidden champion they haven't actually talked about. The Yordle Lord Veigar, his ability is that he casts a damage ray 20 times on everything onto the board. Think Karthus, the Yordle. So he's actually very, very potent and has definitely baited so many players in my lobbies when they're like, oh my god, I'm reroll Yordles. And they go bot 2 every single game. But when the ones that end up finding a 2-star Veigar because they can survive 3 turns and get Veigar online, I haven't seen them go outside of top 2. So it's one of these like, first or 8 types of style, which I think are super fun, high risk, very high reward if you're able to live past it.
I'm just gonna learn to play it. I'm just gonna be Yordle main. Like that's the plan. Yeah. We're gonna have to skip past the classes for now, but we've talked about I think basically every champion in there a little bit. So there's tons of places to go and read it. Let's talk a little bit about some item changes because there have been some fairly significant ones that have happened. So let's just go through this. I guess to me the one that probably stands out the most is the Banshee's Claw change, where it blocks an ability, but it doesn't block the damage completely anymore. It blocks up to 600. I still think it's a good item, but it won't be as mandatory as it felt in a lot of comps towards the end of 5.5.
Yeah, when we switched it to kind of affect the 3 units, standing next to each other, it increased the power of that item substantially. We did like the kind of gameplay it was promoting as far as like positioning and being able to feel like you can protect your backline carries in a way against spellcasters without having to sacrifice a full item slot. So, yeah, I think this is just trying to make it more reasonable, and I hopefully now we have a tuning lever there, so we can kind of tune that.
I think it does.
Yeah, it feels like, Banshee's Claw at one point became this really high utility item that almost every composition needed to play. And also, it was like something that 5.5 is currently like sort of balanced around in not a great way. So Banshee's Claw, for example, on the current live set for 5.5 Dawn of Heroes, blocks the shot of Aphelios' Dark Vigil. The Aphelios casts, he can have infinite attack damage and infinite attack speed, whatever, and he does his Dark Vigil. It won't do anything to anybody that has a Banshee's Claw shield. And that feels really bad. And I think people who play like Chugbug, for example, the Kha'Zix 3, it's supposed to crit for like 1500. It does nothing because the Banshee's Claw just stops it with the spell shield. So it feels kind of cheese, in some ways. I think that this is much more healthy. And also, going down the list here, gives Quicksilver a little bit actual consideration. I've actually been building Quicksilver, which I also really like that you've added bonus stats from the Radiant Armory kind of takeaway, right? Like Quicksilver adds attack speed, Quicksilver not quite as powerful, just like half stats on both. Really good stuff overall. And I will also say, since basically that was the only change to Quicksilver, that I think Static Shiv is like still okay. I actually played a game with like Goobum, Spencer, and Nuster, and like some really high level players. And Static Shiv was the first item I built. And I got top 2, almost got it first. So that should make both Static and Mortdog very happy to hear that right now.
I watched this game. He speaks the truth.
Game. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think like bringing this back a little to the high level, like the item changes that were done here were actually a lot about trying to make all the items a little bit more, either like less OP or generally more usable. So you can see actually like Archangel Staff is no longer tied to the mana pool of the champion. So you can now use it on more different types of champions, but it still has the idea of like kind of like super scaling into the fight as an AP carry. Deathblade basically is just more, it's basically just like AD now, instead of having this weird stacking mechanic where like certain characters would just be really good at like tagging all the champs and then super scaling in the fight. Runan's Hurricane was super tied to on-hit champions, and now we wanted to remove that and see if we can just make it more just like it's just an AD item that you can use in different combinations, stuff like that. So yeah, I think Hextech Gunblade is also just one where we're like, hey, we really liked how the the Radiant version really cool and stuff were working. It's like it just provides a very unique gameplay style, and I want to see how that plays out. Because it kind of felt a little bit limited in its use cases. It was just kind of like Veigar from set 4, where he was like getting such big shields and chaining that over and over. It felt really specific to how it could be powerful. So yeah.
World would Ruden's Hurricane revert back to an on-hit situation? I know this is like obviously first draft, and we have a lot more data that probably needs to come in before we do that. Well, what's like a point where you say like, okay, like we probably should revert Ruden's Hurricane? Like, what kind of situation would arise for that to happen?
Yeah, I think it would mainly be that one players really just hate this new item. Like they're just not having fun at all. Like there's just no reason to build it. You're just like, why would I build this when I can build anything else, with these components or whatever. Um, but also, I think the issue with it really is that the on hit effects were being multiplied by 2. that kind of like isn't a lever we could control. So balancing that item has just kind of been a nightmare over time. So like anytime the character had an on hit effect, like Yasuo from 5 or Vayne from previous sets, just like you just had to build it on this champion. And like
Yeah.
it's fun to have synergies in our game where it's like these things go together well, but when they go together too well, it makes things a little bit linear and a bit boring in a way, right? It's just like you just got to do this when you're playing this champion, and that's something we kind of want to avoid. So I think it's highly unlikely that we would go back, but we're always flexible based on how things go and moving forward.
Yeah, in a game that's all about adaptability, the more difficult you can make it to determine what is best in slot, quote unquote, for a champion, the better it is for that sort of like play style, probably. But yeah, I like these changes. I like things like the Ionic Spark, just getting one more hex of effectiveness, just makes it more of an appealing item to build. But so all these changes are good. I think they're going to make people build these items more. But you know what? There's still one thing that we haven't talked about yet. That's not actually in the game yet. It's not actually playable yet, but it's coming soon. It's going to be double up. Finally, everybody's been asking for it. It's a team mode for TFT. It's a 2v2v2v2. I'm hyped about this because of the crazy things that can happen within this as well. You can gift your partner a bunch of different stuff, champions, items, all that stuff. But the thing that stands out to me more than anything is the reinforcements. If you win your fight quickly and your partner is still fighting their battle, your dudes will jump over their board and start fighting as well. Now they won't do damage if you win, but they won't do hit point damage, I should say, if you win. But they will obviously help your partner's board out a lot. But I can't wait to play this. It's gonna be pretty nuts, and it's gonna be really fun to see what the pros can do with this specifically, I think.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to a lot. Every streamer I'm talking to, like not even just like Soju and Kiyun, but like I'm in Skara and Choco Bars and Starsman's chat, like trying to talk to them, like, hey, what are you looking forward to the most? Or like, how are you enjoying it? Everyone's like, I can't wait for 2v2 mode. And I'm like, I can't wait for everybody's units to come to Dr. Mundo's board and realize they still can't kill him with 14 units
Seriously.
attacking him. It's gonna be a really great time. It's gonna be super hectic, and like honestly, like people are a little bit jumping the gun. They're like, why isn't Riot hosting 2v2 World Championships yet? It's like, first of all, we don't even know if the mode is balanced, let alone like something that is worthy of competition in general. But I think that the fact that there's so much enthusiasm is a good sign, right? Like ultimately, we can always take away like, oh, you guys are just demanding too much. But the other side of it is that I think people are genuinely just super hyped for TFT again. And that's great because every game on Twitch and in general, just in gaming, go through the first cycle of hype, and then it kind of plateaus, and then it's always a question about whether they can recapture some of that magic. And I think this double up mode is really getting close to that. Like I think most people are really like, it's just like the talk of the town. Many times like, well, what should we do? Like, everyone's like, oh, let's just play 2v2 duos. That's what I'm gonna do in TFT. And I think that's really exciting just to be part of that right now.
Yeah, I think from a design standpoint, like the two main things I've always had a gripe with our game when I first came onto the team was one, kind of creativity and making sure every game feels interesting. I think Augments has actually done a lot to help with this feeling. And then second was like just the game needs to be more social, right? And I think this is a huge step in that direction. And I've been wanting for this to come out for a long time, and I think everyone is going to be very happy with when they finally get to play this and actually get to play with their friends and try to beat up on other pairs. So
Yeah, it's gonna be really cool, and it's one of the things I've appreciated about the TFT team when they've been making the game is we see, and now especially through the labs, we see a lot of stuff where in other games this would be something you hear about in like a making of video like years later. It's like, oh yeah, we tried this mode for a while, and but in TFT it's like they actually just put it out there for people to play, you know? So I hope people appreciate that too, in that TFT is one of the most experimental games I've ever, been a part of a community for, where the design team is willing to just say, hey, we think this will be fun. We're not quite sure if it's going to work or not yet, but we're going to put it out there and let people play it and see what happens. And I think that to me is one of the most fun things about the game itself. So this is kind of another instance of that, where, you look at all this stuff that's going to be a part of this mode. Is all of this going to survive as the mode develops and is polished? Like, probably not. I mean, there's probably going to be some changes, but is it cool that we get to play it in this form, at least for a little bit? I think that's going to be neat, So I appreciate that too. And I think that gets kind of, that goes under the radar for the community because we're kind of getting used to it at this point, but just how experimental the development team kind of seems to be, which is interesting. Like, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, Statikk, because a lot of game development teams that I've known in the past are very protective. They don't want to look like they ever do anything wrong. They want to make sure that everything's very polished before it goes out the door. And TFT almost seems collaborative in a way, with the community. But can you kind of talk about that attitude and what it's like to be on that team?
Yeah, I mean, the reality of kind of these situations is like the bigger you get, the more expectations that get put onto you as far as like, how clean your game is, how polished is it, and the kind of decisions you need to make it becomes harder because you can't just be as crazy. When you're the underdog, you just do anything to get noticed, right? You're just like, oh,
Sure.
let's just put a dragon in there in the middle lane or whatever and just make this game crazy. And so I think as you get bigger and more popular, you kind of have to start being a little more cautious about what things you do because it might make a lot of players who currently love your game not love it as much anymore. And on TFT, I really do feel that sense of like innovation that makes me personally excited to be a game designer. Like that's what I love, pushing the boundaries and doing new stuff. I think that's what TFT has always represented to me as a concept, is like taking the auto battler genre to the next level and seeing all those evolutions the same way that I experienced it on League of Legends and the MOBA genre. And I definitely feel that on the team. The team's very open to new ideas all the time. And I think our biggest hurdle usually is not really like our willingness to try it, but just like the technological implications of what we want to do are actually quite challenging at times. Doing 2v2 is actually quite complicated because League of Legends was never built for this, and so we had to kind of like figure out how to navigate that because this has been an idea that in our heads for a long time. It's something that we knew for a long time that this was gonna pop off. I mean, we saw all these TFT tournaments all the time being artificially made and put together. It's like, okay, obviously there's a desire here that we feel as well. So this team definitely is very open to those ideas, and it's more about how do we get there in a reasonable way.
Makes sense. Are you ready to officially disclose who your 2v2 partner is?
Oh man, I'll raffle it off inside of Riot's Slack channels. Probably I'll sell my
all right,
greatness. So.
That's a good answer. Any more thoughts on double up Frodan, or should we move on to agree?
I think we're ready for agree.
All right, let's do it. Let's go on to everybody's favorite segment, agree. Our first question. Set 5.5 ended up being the upper half of TFT sets, ended up being in the upper half of TFT sets in terms of success and fun. Agree? Statikk, we'll have you answer first.
Yeah, that's hard because you have to think back to all the other sets.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just still probably say, like, even though I love the 5.5 and I think we did a lot of cool stuff to kind of make the set a lot more interesting and more reasonable. I feel like it's still probably just an average for me personally. So I don't think it is. I think it's a slight disagree for me. It's just there's been a lot more times I've been much more excited about the game personally. And I think it did a lot to make the set better, but yeah, for some reason it didn't grab me personally as much as I would have wanted.
And keep in mind, Twitch chat, you can also vote. You see this little square for chat right down there as well. So let us know. Frodan, agree or disagree?
Yeah, so basically, can you put 4 sets higher than 5.5? And this is because I think we have 8 now, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.55, 5.5. So we have 8 total currently. And I guess if you count 6 PB right now, but let's not, just because it's not fair for the rankings at the moment.
It's not out yet, yeah.
But like recency bias, right? Like everyone's like fresh and new, and everyone's already saying like set 6 is the best set ever. And like while I'm inclined to immediately agree, you can't just say that because it's like one day in. Everyone said set 5 was looking really hype at the very beginning as well. So the question is it better than 4 sets? And I don't know if I can say that. I think set 1 already holds like a special place in our heart just because it was the beginning. Set 4 was particularly very special. 3.5 and like aspects of 3 were really good. So I kind of agree with that. I think it's just like right there in the middle, and I can't agree just on the principle that I think that I can't definitively put in the upper half. I think that Radiant Blessings end up being really great. The Radiant Armories, especially the last patch, I was very pleasantly surprised how good double Radiant Armory felt, almost to the point where I wish it got introduced earlier, because it brought fun back into the game into a different way. And ultimately, 5.5 ended up being very balanced. It was very competitive. It was actually great for skill expression. Where the one big X factor it lacked was fun. Compared to the other sets. And this is not to say that TFT wasn't fun. Like, I still played 5.5 an enormous amount. It's a special set to me because it's what I hit Challenger in. But like it just didn't really have that replayability that the other sets just generated countless times over. So I think that's where ultimately I have to draw the line.
Yeah, I think I'll probably disagree with this too. I do think 5.5 was a huge improvement over 5.0 in terms of my own personal enjoyment with the game. And I did enjoy 5.5 a lot as well. But I can definitely think of 4 sets that I probably liked. I probably had a little bit more fun with overall. So yeah, I agree with all of you. I think it's close, but I think I'm gonna have to disagree with it too. Chat says, I think the chat poll is pretty close actually. Oh, it's still going. They've still got like half less. This is a long poll.
It's a good question because set rank is really something that's so subjective. Like no one's ever 100% correct on it. So
right, because it's all about your personal fun level, really.
Yeah, totally.
Know, yeah, it's definitely a subjective question, not an objective question. Right now, it looks like chat is disagreeing, but only slightly. And as we show that, I'm sure
it's probably because we all mind controlled them. I mean, we mind controlled them with our 3 disagrees. I mean, come on.
You're not supposed to talk about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All the agrees were Sun Astronaut because Sun Astronaut leaves 5.5 is really fun. He's a big fan of it.
It wasn't bad. This wasn't top half. All right, let's move on to the next question. Question number 2. The learning curve for hextech augments is too high. Agree? Statikk?
I don't think so personally. I mean, like, it depends what you expect to, yourself to do in this set. If you're gonna try to like sit there and memorize all of them, like, yeah, this is hard. This is harder than remembering all the presidents, back in the day in your history class. So, I wouldn't recommend doing that. But we made a lot of augments that were meant to be pretty straightforward. Like, there's definitely a good amount that are just like plug and play. Like, you just kind of play the way you do, and you're gonna do fine. But there are some that you can opt into that are going to make your head explode. And that's kind of like that range of difference of like, hey, this is simple, this is easy to get, versus this is really hard and I don't know why I chose this and I regret all my decisions. Like, that was meant to be part of the experience. So it really depends how much you're opting into. But I think if you're just looking for a simple time, there's definitely ways to play hextech augments in a simple way.
All right, Frodan.
I'm going to agree here, but with the caveat that it's too high for a specific group of players, and it's for people who have never played TFT. If they've never played TFT before, hextech augments is just too hard. They have no clue what's going on. And I know this because I sat and walked through somebody who hasn't played before, and they're like, I don't think I'm just gonna go back and play whatever game I was playing instead. Just too many elements, and I get it because the learning curve isn't high for anybody who has played. And millions upon millions, tens of millions of people have played TFT by now. So, like, surely for them, it's a really refreshing experience. And I'm just saying that if there was an easier way to onboard those players, then it would be complete disagree. But I just have to agree because if there's a group of players that we do have to care about a lot, is how do we get new people to play TFT who haven't played before? As well as, of course, convince the people who left to come back and for people who stay to continue to stay.
All right. I think this is our second subjective question in a row because I think I think Dan's point and Statikk's point are both valid there. Where I think there's a certain group of players that might have a harder time to embrace it, but then again, I could see newer players who just picked up the game being like, "Well, there's so many of them. There is no burden at all to try to memorize these. I just have to react to it and do the best I can when they show up. And I like the other parts of the game, so I'm just going to roll with this." So I could see it kind of going both ways. And so for that reason, I think I'm going to disagree with this because like I said, I don't think there is a learning curve with hextech augments because there's so many of them and you're not going to see everyone every game. In fact, if you like to play the game in a specific way, there's a very high likelihood that some of them will just never appear for you, just based on, what the game offers you, being reflective of what you play in the early game. So yeah, I think that just the burden just isn't there. Your job is to react to what you see as best you can, and players are either going to like that or they're not going to like that. But I think most players are going to like it. So I'll go ahead and disagree with that. Chat pretty heavily disagrees too. I do say that Frodan has a good point. I think there are going to be players that get turned off by it, but I hope / expect most players to be okay with it. But we'll see.
Yeah, and in Frodan's defense, I really feel like our onboarding could be a lot better. I wish there was a mode where you could play with the item components off, or like for some reason the game just like auto built items for you, so you wouldn't have to worry about it or something. Like those kind of options to help people, get used to the game and not have to think about 20 different systems at the same time would be amazing. So yeah.
I want, so the thing is, like, TFT is like very much a young person's game, and I say that because people make fun of the fact that it's like less mechanical than, say, Summoner's Rift, but like I can never convince my parents to play TFT. There's just too much going on, and I would love that because they've tried Hearthstone. That's where the game that I came from right before TFT. So, and they've tried Hearthstone. They can understand it. Can they understand something like TFT? And I think ultimately that's just something that's on the wish list of many things I'd love TFT to be. And again, I know that if I wasn't factoring that group at all, I'd be alongside with you guys. We did disagree.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, this is the perfect kind of question, right? Because we actually have differing opinions. Let's check out our final question here. Set 6 is the most innovative set to date. The game almost feels like a Slay the Spire run. That was actually a tweet from Mismatched Socks, which after he made that tweet, I was like, oh yeah, that's a game I always meant to go and check out. And I played it, and I see exactly what he's saying now. Because when I talked earlier about the game kind of being a story, you kind of get that vibe, I think. So I said I should stop talking and throw it over to Statikk to see if he agrees with this or not. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, this is the only one that I think is not subjective. Okay, DoA. Let me just tell you. I think this is the
Tell
one
me why.
where I think, again, talking about our approach, it really was like the greatest hits as far as like bringing all these elements that we thought were really great together. And I guess in a way, that's not innovative, but I think to people playing this set, it's going to feel like the most novel and interesting version we've ever put forth. And for that reason, I think it's a very exciting time to be a TFT player. And so, yeah, I'm hard to agree on this one, but I'm obviously very biased because I really worked very closely on this one. And I feel strongly that we've made a lot of decisions that will make this one stand out in a lot of people's minds for the long term. So
that's an agree from you. Easy then.
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, Frodan, what do you think?
I definitely agree with the first sentence. The most innovative set. It's also the most complex set. It's also got it's got so much going on for it. That's really, really great. Do I agree that it almost feels like a Slay the Spire run? Having played 1,000 hours plus of Slay the Spire, I didn't get the exact same feeling of it. I think the reason why Sox says it is because he's such a fan of Slay the Spire that he can't think of a greater way to complement a game in terms of its strategic depth. So I think that this is Sox using a comparative analogy to try and praise Set 6. So I can't agree with it just based off that. But I totally understand the sentiment behind it. If he chose a different game that was great, because what it really is that TFT Set 6 Gizmos and Gadgets is basically the culmination of every good design that we've learned from every auto battler period, like across Dota Underlords, Hearthstone Battlegrounds, current auto chess, even aspects. I'm like watching my friend stream Legion TD2, right? And I'm just like, man, Set 6 is just like all this but better. And so it feels like a culmination of tons of learning and tons of angry feedback on social media and Reddit. So I will say that so the answer is I disagree with this, but I totally get where Sox' sentiment is. It's a semantics argument here at this point.
All right, so it's a disagree from Frodan based on semantics. I will take that one step farther, and I will agree with it because, like I said, I hadn't played Slay the Spire before I saw that tweet from Sox. I remembered that was the game I had intended to go and play a long time ago and then forgotten about. I went and installed it, and then 6 hours later, I was like, what happened? Where did my life go? It was great, you know, and so I'm gonna agree with this, but I think the reason I'm agreeing with it is because this tweet is what inspired me to try the game that inspired the tweet. So my brain was heavily affected by this being the premise for it. So I will admit that it is a tainted it's a tainted perspective on the question, but I have to agree because it's the reality of my situation. So there you go. Chat, meanwhile, is
Yeah, I'm sure chat probably thinks very highly of Slay the Spire. Again, it's one of my favorite games of all time. Me and my fiance play Slay the Spire like all the time. We watch Slay the Spire streamers. It's such a great game. It doesn't remind me of it exactly though. I get what he's saying though. I get what he's saying.
Sure enough. Well, there you go. It's an agree from pretty much everybody, but again, good points from Frodan. That's not patronizing. That's true. But that is our agree segment. Now it's everybody's segment, everybody's favorite segment. It's the tier list, and we're doing something a little bit different here. Since Statikk was so involved in making a lot of the augments that we see in Set 6, we decided it would be fun to have him do an augment tier list. So take us through it. Top 10. Throw them out in any order. Now, I saw you already posted it in our internal chat, so I avoided looking at it so I can be surprised, but you're very well prepared, so go ahead.
I'm excited to see if you guys even know these ones exist. Maybe you don't. Number 10 on my list is calculated loss. This is one we thought about really early. It's basically, it incentivizes you to lose your combats, and you basically gain gold in a free shop refresh. So it actually incentivizes a very weird strategy, and I think a design goal of mine for a long time is like, how can you make losing fun? And I think this actually does it. You know, like it's really hard in most games. You'll play just like they lose. They're like, oh, this game sucks. I don't want to play this anymore. And I think this is one of the first times I'm like, oh, it's actually pretty fun to lose. Like you're trying to lose, but just barely, you know, eke out all that value over time. And it's really fun. So I think calculated loss represented kind of like how impactful augments could be as far as incentivizing players to do some really fun play styles. So yeah, that's definitely 10 on my list. It could even be higher, but whatever.
We should emphasize too what the traits do exactly. You mentioned it, but just for people who might miss it, I'll just read it out. After losing your combat, gain 2 gold and a free shop refresh. So
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. The memes when you say like it clicked, it could be like, oh, calculated every time they lose.
Yeah, exactly. But you might be right this time to lose, so it's great.
True.
Number 9 for me is basically all the trait souls, so like Chemtech Soul, Arcanist Soul, all those ones that give basically +2 to a certain trait. These ones were kind of like, hey, you know, could we bring back some of that feel of Chosen, which was kind of creating some interesting trait build paths, and make sure that, you know, you always kind of feel like there's kind of infinite possibilities with how you build your team comps. So I really like that it brings that flavor in there again when you're getting these, you know, even if the +1 versions I think are interesting, but the +2s really like just your brain starts breaking as far as like what's actually possible in the game once you start getting some of those.
I find myself taking that one a lot for that reason, is that I get to recreate that Chosen feeling. But please continue.
Yeah, it also has this really sweet UI. If you guys haven't seen it yet, on the left side of the trait, you'll see like the hextech augment like power up icon over there. It's pretty sweet. Number 8 for me is high end shopping. One, it's just a funny name. I don't know. I just thought it was a funny name. And secondarily, it was such a simple thing that felt so unique to this set. Basically, champions appear in your shop as if you were 1 level higher. And it's a funny story with this is like originally it was like the lowest tier augment you could possibly be when we put it in, and it was like, oh yeah, people we were playing this game were like, oh, it's pretty good, I guess maybe. Actually, it's not that good. I thought it did nothing. And then like we put it on PBE and everyone's like, oh, this thing is broken. So we actually had to move it all the way to the highest tier with it pretty quickly. So yeah, around the same time. It's really funny. But I just think it's really cool because now you're accessing a new level of shopping that you never could. If you're level 9, you're getting level 10 rates, which you've never seen before. And so that was kind of just like a cool game-breaking moment that I felt augments kind of showed us like, wow, this is all these new things that you can experience inside this set.
Or if you're level 10, you see a level 11 shop up.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So the 7th one for me is Clear Mind. The augment is basically if you have no units on your bench at the end of a round, gain 4 experience points. This is similar to Calculated Loss in that it creates a very interesting play pattern where you don't get to use your bench if you want to get the value. But the fun part for me was just the meme name of it. Like Clear Bench, Clear Mind was something that we always troll about internally. So like we actually literally tried to build an augment around this theme. I worked with Chloe on this one, and it was just a lot of fun to put in the game and see how like good players like Morton Kent would try to play around it. I still think like the sentiment is like it's bad, but I've seen some players pop off with this, and it's pretty fun to see. I hope you guys get to cast some fun games where Clear Mind is a big player in one of these tournament games. So number 6 for me is Metabolic Accelerator. Basically, just makes your tactician move faster as if they were in hyper roll. And you heal 2 health at the start of each round. Your little legend heals health. So this is a really unique mechanic as far as that goes. If you can get it early on, you can actually do like you can lose on purpose and just start healing up and you'll be okay. But it's really just funny because like when you're the only person with this and you're on the carousel and you get to like run and steal the unit way faster than anyone else, it's just something satisfying about being faster than everyone else on the board. It's really funny. So I think that feeling is just fun.
Go scout people and distract them even more than usual.
Scary one.
Yeah, it's good for trolls for sure.
I've taken Metabolic Accelerator and basically lose streaked all the way from stage 2 to stage 4, but was like 3rd in HP, 4th in HP.
Yeah,
it was kind of nuts.
You're giving up the combat, possible combat multiplier. So I think this is definitely some interesting trade-offs, and it might be really powerful. We weren't sure. We thought it was just funny. So I think this is with augments. We're like 100% not sure on like the balance of state of a lot of these right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Totally.
Yeah, number 5 for me is Chemical Overload. This is just something we've been trying to put into the game for a long time. Basically, chem tech units, when they die, will explode in AoE to deal magic damage. I think we actually, on the last time I was on Teamfight Talkshow, we spoiled like an internal like Gloom Seed mechanic for like set 4 that never made it out to you guys. But it had the same mechanic, which is like, hey, when you die, you explode, and finally we got it into the game in a fun way. I heard it's really powerful. I think Mort nerfed it today, but it's really cool because it has
any of my games yet.
Yeah, not all the augments get like special visuals and sounds, but this one actually does. So when you're camping side, you'll kind of hear that like, and you'll see them explode. It's pretty sweet. I think it also gives Twitch a new use case in the comp, which is just like suicide of the back
bomb
line.
to the back line, yeah.
It's just really funny use cases. Maybe you strap a Zizarod onto him too. I don't know. It's just some funny stuff that you could do with that. I think it's really fun.
So wait, if the Zizarod minion comes out of a Chemtech person that exploded, the minion doesn't explode either, right?
No, they're not.
Oh, okay. All right, just double check here.
No.
I don't want to give you any ideas.
No, that sounds toxic.
Chemtech, that's the idea.
It's so thematic, yeah. Number 4 for me is Unstable Evolution. I don't know if you guys seen this one yet, but basically, I was, Ken and I were kind of inspired by this idea of like Pokemon farming, of like farming your rares and your all those perfect stats. So basically, mutants randomly gain a random stat when they get 2 stars. So either health, AD, AP, or attack speed. And if you build up to a 3-star, that is actually 3 different mutation bonuses stacked together. So it's just kind of fun, long game you play, building this up. And when you roll the 2-star, you're just hoping, oh my god, I'm playing Kog'Maw, I really want the attack speed. Like, please give me the attack speed, please give me the attack speed. And I think that like kind of prey moments are pretty fun. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So I picked this today, and I had 2 2-star Cassidans with the exact same stat line that got manipulated, and I thought that it was just like, oh, this is what Cassidy gets this game. I didn't realize that it was 2 of the exact same stat. It was just a 1 and 4 both times. Okay, I didn't realize.
Yep.
I actually sold the Cassidy. I was like, I don't need it anymore. I regret everything.
Oh, yeah, it's really strong for like a reroll mutant type of playstyle.
Oh, what? That Cassidy would have had like 400 AD if I just like.
What? Practical? I don't know.
Live and learn.
I don't know.
It's very slow attack speed though.
Oh. All right.
All right,
number 3 for me is Portable Forge. So basically you open an armory and you get to choose one of 3 artifacts from Ornn from set 4. And I think this one just presents a really unique experience as far as like the game goes. And this is one of those greatest hits type of things. Like I think everyone loved Ornn from set 4, and bringing his items back, even though we couldn't bring his actual champion back into it, was a cool way to pay homage. Yeah, to kind of. That's the great design that was done on his artifacts. So I think bringing them back is just a sweet, sweet, sweet moment for everyone. It's also like pretty rare because it's at the highest tier, but I've seen some people have some fun with getting some of these, like the collector again and all those things. I know Kent's terrified of the winter one though, the Eternal Winter. That
Oh,
one was
yeah.
it was a big balance problem. So I think we're kind of like scared, but you can't, you literally have to random the forge and then random within the choices, and I don't know. I think it's just gonna be pretty rare. So number 2 is level up, and this one is hard because it actually used to be like when you chose the augment, it just level you up, but that just ended up being so overpowered
Wow.
that we couldn't keep it in the game. It was just like it was beyond the highest tier. It was like 2 tiers above anything else in the game. So
That sounds
we
kind of
couldn't do
insane.
that. But the main point of this was, basically allowing players to reach level 10, which is a big dream that we were kind of trying to build out for this one. And so the other mechanic that comes along with it is you can, when you buy XP, you just get additional XP. So it's easier to just level up in general. So yeah, like Frodan said, when you combine it with high-end shopping, you can actually access level 11 rates, which is just like basically you get to like 3-star 5 costs for the most part if you're at that point in the game. So good on you. Yeah.
All right.
Super
What's
neat.
the number 1? What's
I don't know if you
list?
guys have seen this one. This is my favorite one, and I thought I was gonna hate it when I first put it in because it was suggested by Giovanni, who was the kind of the lead on the set. But it's called Built Different. Your units with no traits active gain 400 health and 80% attack speed. So it really incentivizes you to play a very weird way. You get really dizzy because every time you activate a trait, you just start panicking. You're like, oh no, this is not right, this is not right. And you start like switching guys in and out. You try to like figure it out, and it's really fun. And you can get some pretty interesting late game boards. I'm very excited to every time I see this personally, I will take it, even though I'm in a terrible position to use it. I will just do it personally. But I'm hoping to see again this one be played maybe on a tournament stage level and see what they can do with it. So
I'm hoping I get this one. I've not been offered this one yet, but fingers crossed.
I have. Does it affect legendaries like Jace, who has Transformer, for example?
Yeah, that's an unfortunate thing. We've had a lot of debates internally around like, one trait shouldn't count or not, but it just ended up being very complicated.
Like
it's something that we may retract down the line, but it's something that I didn't want to release with because, like you said, Frodan, this is probably the most complicated set we've ever released, and like getting into too many nitty-gritty rules around how these augments work is just kind of adding on to that complication that I really didn't want to get into. So. It's tough, but yeah, you can't use Yumi and Jace are not going to be very good in built different compositions. So
it's a really fun one. Super changes the way you play, and I can appreciate that.
I'm excited because I think in the games I played, and like I said, I played maybe 15 total so far, but I think I still haven't seen most of the ones on this list, and that just speaks like how many augments are in the game. So looking forward to like the level up one, built different, like. Please, Mort, send me level up at some point in my life. It'll be fun. So there you go. Top 10 augments. We'll have to revisit this in the future and see if that changes. Maybe we'll have you back at some point to do that because I'm curious how that'll evolve over the course of the set. But it's time for some Q&A. So during this segment, while we have Statikk answer this question, go ahead and put your questions in Twitch chat as well. Statikk will pick one. You will get a $10 gift certificate, and you get to have your question answered on the broadcast. So go forth and do that. Now, let's check out the question we have for Statikk here. It is, how has game balancing affected your game designing? Any example is using your balancing experience from Summoner's Rift to cut or add augments that warp the game in good and bad ways? Was I think kind of the gist of that question from Ostian.
That's an awesome question. I feel like your viewers are just really insightful. This is like
we have the smartest viewers in esports. I'm just saying. Like, yeah, it's an objective truth. Yeah, don't need to put that one up on a degree question.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because like I think this is just personally for me. Like I've been in that like space of balancing the game so long that I almost have become a little bit averse to the idea of like making a game super balanced. Like I've been there too long, and now I'm just like I want to dabble in the dark arts of like how do we just make it crazy? And I think that's kind of you see it in augments coming out a lot of just like I think I've gotten to the point where I understand fun is the most important thing, and then balance can kind of come a little bit afterwards. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter, but if you don't have a fun game, then it's not even worth balancing, if that makes sense. So there's definitely a lot of augments that we had to cut. There was an example was Nico is actually where you could basically get 2 Nicos off an augment, and it just ended up being way too powerful and allowing for way too many 3-star or I mean 3-star 5 costs and 4 costs that we just weren't comfortable with releasing it. So that's an example of an augment that we cut based on purely like game balance and game health needs because we just didn't see it working out, you know. I think the loaded dice one, which I think is called High Roller, is in a dangerous space as well, you know, and it's one that barely made the cut, I think, as far as how it goes, and it may get cut down the line if it ends up just being way too powerful or way too consistent at making the game feel really unfair and not fun. So, yeah, I mean, we definitely take this into account. I talk to Mort and Kent a lot every day as far as like, hey, I'm feeling weird about this augment. What do you guys think? And it's just kind of how it works in the team. We kind of just bounce ideas off and, you know, we play the game as much as we can. So
it's funny that you mentioned that because they just buffed High Roller. They give you 3 loaded dice now instead of 2.
I got
yeah,
that one.
yeah.
You're like, I was not sure if it should make it into the game. It's like, let's just buff it. See what happens.
I got a Cassidon 3 in 2 rounds with that one.
Oh my
So
gosh, yeah.
put that out there. Yep.
Scary.
It's good for finding those 1 costs. But so go ahead and check Discord. We've got some of the questions from chat in there, so you can find one that you like. While you pick that out, I'm going to ask Frodan a question. So in the games you've played so far, what's been like the standout moment that you've had in Set 6?
Standout moment that I've had.
Yeah. Most memorable moment so far.
That's tough, man. It's tough because I have to think about all the games that I've played. And I think I'm like right now. So I found out that I'm doing the PBE Clash this weekend, right? Which is a global invitational that was open sign up, but it's an invitational that's going to be like the first look at competitive for TFT. I thought that I was just hosting, kind of like what Necro does, like, you know, just kind of ushering us in and out of game and just like asking the right questions. It turns out I'm casting some games. So I was playing everything under the guise of just being very competitive and not just like explorative, you know, just like I'm not trying to like meme around and hang out. Like I'll let someone else reroll Yordle and tell me if it's good or not, but I think it's kind of bad. So I'll just like jam the good stuff for a while. So I apologize now, DoA. I actually didn't do a lot of fun stuff. I did a lot of like competitive stuff because I felt like I needed to know that going to this weekend. I will say that the coolest was almost 3-starring both Yone and Fiora. That was pretty dope. A lot of people call them the second coming of Splash Bros.
Yeah, Splash Bros.
They're not really bros. But it's a really, really fun comp of playing like multiple challengers and having Yone and Fiora just slice and dice everything up. Super cool.
Nice. I did 3-star on Urgot yesterday. That felt pretty good. That was my first of Set 6.
Yeah.
That was fun. All right. Well, Statikk, have you made your selection?
Yeah, we have. We made the decision. There's a lot of good questions. Right. I just had to choose one though. So.
Oh, there it is. I've only got one monitor right now, so I had another window in front of it. Do you have, and can you share any crazy augment that the team came up with while making the set that you guys chose? Oh, you already talked about that, didn't it?
I talked about one, but there's another one that I think I want to get into, which is really fun. I think it's something that everyone's a little sad about. It's actually one of the early augments that we made, and it actually was called Future Peepers. It was like our troll meme name. We tried to put as many meme names in our augment system as we could, but it's called Future Peepers. Eventually, it was named Future Sight. What it actually does is it allows you to see who you're going to go up next against. So you can see your opponent, and you know who you're going to go up against the next. And it also gives you a Zephyr. So you're able to of leverage that in a very specific way. Unfortunately, yeah. For one, okay, balance concerns aside, I don't know if it's good or bad. I think I'm not sure, but we had a lot of issues with just like having to build the UI and the UX experience of how we would display the player to the opponent. We were using a very like janky way of doing it at first, and we just didn't have enough time to do it at the end. I mean, if we are able to get it in for maybe a 6.5 or beyond, I would be really excited. But yeah, Future Peepers is something that we all kind of, when we had to put it away, we were like, no. So it's a fun one.
We'll look forward to that in 6.5 in some iteration, right? Yeah.
Super interesting if that was the case for everybody. If everyone knew for like one round, like who they would face, I think that'd be pretty interesting. But
yeah, if you could choose to let everyone know. Huh. Well, congrats to our giveaway winners, Ostayan. I'm butchering your pronunciation. Apologies, but whatever. You're the one who typed it. Ostayan, and then Gabardo, who is our chat giveaway winner. Congratulations on that one. And that brings us to the end of the episode. And I believe this is our longest episode ever. This ended up being like the Set 6 megasode or something, mega episode. So thanks to Statikk for coming and sitting with us and talking TFT, nerding out with us for over 90 minutes now. As we finish this up, what are your final thoughts on the show here, Statikk?
Yeah, man, I'm always happy to come back. I always enjoy talking with everyone as well as you guys about all this stuff. But yeah, I'm really excited. We finally got this set out. Everyone can see it. Everyone can play it. I hope you guys have a lot of fun with it. I know we put a lot of hard work into this one, and we are hoping to blow your minds in a way. And I hope it's working.
I would say it is so far. Frodan, what are your final thoughts for the day?
Oh man, Set 6 is so fun. I need to do work, and there's so much work to do, and there's so much real life responsibilities, and it's just so easy to put them all off and play video games. And of course, shout out to the Riot team for just putting so much work into it. It clearly shows, and I think everyone's initial reception to it is like just a reflection of all the hard work. And I think that it makes me super excited for this weekend, right? Like the PB tournament, it's going to be happening. The broadcast starts on Saturday and Sunday, the 23rd and 24th, because I believe the first wave of games start tomorrow. So it's going to be pretty hype. We're going to have our first competitions. So make sure to tune in for that.
All right. Well, on that note, that is going to do it for Teamfight Talk Show today. Thanks to all of you out there for watching. Thanks again to Riot Statikk for coming on the show and giving us some insight. Frodan has one more thing to say, though. What is it?
Yeah, we're not doing our next episode on November 3rd.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Should mention that.
So 2 weeks from now, we were supposed to have like a November 3rd episode. That's not going to happen. And then the episode after that, it's unlikely I'll be around. So I'll see y'all in like a month and a half.
We'll hold it down until you come back. Don't worry about it. But yeah, you've got some important real life stuff to do. So don't worry about it, man. It's fine. It'll be good. But that is going to do it for the episode. Like Frodan said, too, this weekend, Saturday and Sunday at 6 p.m. PDT, it's the Gizmos and Gadgets PvE Clash. It's going to be a ton of fun. I'm going to be watching that. Speaking of real life stuff, got some stuff going on this weekend, but I'll try to tune in as much as I can. But again, thanks to Riot Statikk for coming on the show. Thanks everyone at home for watching. Thanks to GiantSlayer and Wisdom for producing this wonderful show. And thanks to Riot for making TFT. That is going to do it for us today here on Teamfight Talk Show. So until next time, it'll be a little while, but that's great because you got plenty of time to go out and conquer the ladder in a Set 6 or conquer the PvE at least. So have fun with that. Stay safe, and we'll catch you next time.